afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second round of the public sector debate competition. I'm Aniki Clark, communication lead in the TIU, and I will be your moderator for this match. We've had a very exciting morning where teams have advanced to the quarterfinals, and we will decide from this match this afternoon which team will advance to the quarterfinals of the public sector debate competition. And with us this afternoon, we have the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation as the proponent, and the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs as the opponent. And they will be debating the moot, be it resolved that the environmental damage brought about by cruise ships is outweighed by the economic gain. Right, so the environment versus the economy. And at this point, I will invite the teams to introduce themselves, starting with the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation.
Good afternoon. My name is Kingston Daniel Case, and I am the first speaker of the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation.
Good afternoon, Andrea Jones.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle Osborne, and I'm the reply speaker of the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation.
Thank you, Team Meg JC, and I will now invite the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Dwyer from the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs.
Good afternoon, all. I'm Crystal Paris Campbell, and I'm the second speaker for the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs.
Good afternoon. My name is Sharika Mills. I'm the reply speaker for Team MLC.
Thank you very much, teams. And for those of you joining us for the very first time, our judging partners are the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment. And at this point, I will invite the judges to introduce themselves.
Thank you very much, Aniki. My name is Jermaine Barrett. I'm the chief adjudicator for this competition.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Curtis Wallace, and I'm a wing adjudicator.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alan Carter, and I'm also a wing adjudicator.
Thank you very much, judges. Thank you very much, teams. And at this point, I will turn over to our chief adjudicator, Jermaine Barrett, to marshal the debate. Best of luck, teams, and enjoy for those of you watching online.
I'm sure they will. Thank you very much, Aniki. All right, so we have two very competitive teams here with us from the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation proposition. Opposition, Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. Just for the benefit of my audience, if you're new, just pay attention. You will see the first speakers on each team speaking for approximately 7 minutes, the second speaker speaking for 6 minutes. Then we enter a period of cross-questioning where each team gets 5 minutes to ask questions of the other team. Then we conclude the debate with the reply speeches lasting for 5 minutes each on each team or each side. Of note, the first two speeches have what we call protected time. So the first and last minute of each of those two speeches are protected from points of information. You will know, debaters, you will know when you've spoken for 1 minute by an audible sound of a bell. All right, we haven't got the bell ready as yet. It's an electronic bell. There you go, there you go. And of course, when you have 1 minute to go, or 1 minute remaining in your speech, you will hear another ding of the bell. When you have completed the allotted time, you will hear 2 dings of the bell. And when you are out of time, that's 10 seconds in addition to the officially allotted time, you will hear continuous dinging of the bell. And that 10 seconds is in recognition of the fact that you may hear the signal indicating that you are out of time. You'll hear midway you're finalizing or completing a sentence. So you just have 10 minutes to wrap thereafter. Debaters, are there any questions? Comments, queries? Okay, good. So let's get this show on the road. Let's get it started. At this time, I call upon the first speaker from the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. Let's make that speaker welcome. Hear, hear.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable judges, esteemed opponents, today we, the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, stand in favor of the resolution that the environmental damage brought about by cruise ship is outweighed by the economic gain. Now, cruise tourism plays a crucial role in boosting local economies, creating jobs, and fostering infrastructure development. These economic benefits are vital for growth and prosperity in the Caribbean region. Now, for the purposes of this debate, we'll be referring to environmental damage as the adverse effects caused by cruise ships, including pollution, habitat destruction, and waste management issues. For economic gain, we will refer to this as a positive financial impact such as increased revenue, job creation, and improved infrastructure resulting from cruise tourism. Now, as first speaker, I'll be looking at the billions of dollars worth of investments made from the revenue generated by cruise ships docking at our very shores, and the sustained economic growth that the industry provides. My second speaker will look at the blue economy in which cruise ships thrive, and also the reinvestment of revenue, billions of dollars, into environmental conservation and mitigation strategies. My third speaker, reply speaker, will anchor the leg and move towards the finish line where we will win this debate with our arguments. Now, according to the Caribbean Tourism Organization, cruise tourism brings millions of US dollars annually, billions of Jamaican dollars, which are crucial for our economy. Cruise tourism significantly boosts Jamaica's economy through the following ways: direct spending on goods by tourists, services and excursions, and also waste management entities. So yes, the revenue is spent on waste management, right? Now, for instance, our cruise tourists contribute to local businesses such as restaurants, craft markets, and tour operators. The influx of money helps support local businesses and creates numerous job opportunities in the hospitality and retail sectors. Not to mention, it feeds our families. Tourism dollars at work for you. Let's look at infrastructure development. Cruise tourism significantly boosts Jamaica's economy through direct spending on infrastructure works. The Ocherius and Montego Bay Pier benefit from round-year cruise ship visits, which help to sustain their tourism-dependent economies. And this is from the Caribbean Journal 2020. It can be said that the infrastructure growth that is provided by the tourism industry is reinvested into the development of our very piers. The Falmouth Pier was developed at a cost of $34 billion, and this was not borne by the Jamaican government. It was from a strategic partnership with, yes, cruise ship operators. We have the Ocherius Pier that was developed at a cost of $4.65 billion. We have the Port Royal Cruise Port at a total of $6.2 billion. We have the Montego Bay Port at a total value of $1.86 billion, a total investment of $47 billion in infrastructure that did not cost our government a dime. Now, in terms of sustained economic growth, tourism brings consistent flows of tourists, helping to stabilize and grow the tourism industry. In nature, growing our economy. Even off-peak seasons, we still have tourists come to Jamaica because we are the land of wood and water. We're the land of sunshine. We're the land of great people, of Bob Marley, of all these great icons you see in both. People want to come to see us, right? It supports local businesses all year round. The Ocherius and Montego Bay piers garnered an estimated $3.6 billion in the last 5 years from cruise tourist ships' arrival. Globally, ocean assets were valued at 24 trillion US dollars in 2016, and it is even more today. This is a strategic opportunity for us to not only capitalize on investing more in cruise ships coming to the island, but for us to capitalize on the revenues that we will generate from these cruise ships arriving to us. Jamaica's blue economy in 2020 was valued at US $2.5 billion gross, and this supported over 500,000 jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, my nephew, my cousin, my aunt, my uncle, my mother, and my father, and even your relatives, all are employed by the tourism sector, which is supported by cruise ship arrivals. The economic gain is undisputable, and it is sure to outweigh the environmental impact. Opponents may argue about the environmental impact and say, well, the environment is being damaged. Yes, and we are not here to dispute that fact. What we are saying is that the economic gain far outweighs the impact on the environment. And with the revenue generation, we can pump more funds into protecting the environment and mitigating all the harmful effects of cruise ship tourism. Ladies and gentlemen, judges, opponents, I say this to you. Let us think of the big picture. Think how tourism dollars can work for you. Think how it has been working for you. And let us continue on the path of sustained development, economic gain, economic growth, and job creation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First speaker from Team MEGJC. We now call upon the first speaker from the opposition team, Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, to open that team's case. Hear, hear.
Judges, side proposition and viewers, the opposition is firm in our stance that the environmental damage brought about by cruise ships does, in fact, outweigh the economic gain from them. Now, we're fine with all of the definitions you've given, but you've left the most important one out. Outweighed. Now, what does that mean? It simply means is more than. And the proposition has so far failed to show us that the economic gain is more than the detriment to the environment. So the economic gain from cruises based on the latest PIOJ figures is approximately US $92 million for 2022. And let's just use JMD figures, that's about 14.4 billion. And we're being even more generous than the proposition in terms of the figures that we're quoting. So though these figures represent the total money spent by passengers as quoted by PIOJ, and isn't isolating direct and indirect revenue by government versus direct or indirect revenue by commercial entities, we will generously use this as an earnings figure. I and my second speaker will be demonstrating that cruise ships are cannibals, ravenously eating away at our core tourism product, the environment, by polluting that same environment and slowly killing tourism and other sectors. We will be showing that the economic gain is insufficient to outweigh the damage. And in many instances, no economic gain, no matter how great, no matter how many billions of dollars, can outweigh that damage. My second speaker will specifically look at how dredging at ports used to facilitate the cruise ships is wreaking havoc on the marine environment, thereby threatening our fisheries sector. And then we will look at the unique case of air pollution from ships. Now to my first point. Cruise ships and its industry is cannibalistic to other sectors and the core tourism product, that being Jamaica's beautifully ecologically diverse marine and coastal environments. The sand and sea that you spoke about, which we depend on, is being irreparably destroyed by cruises. And the 92 million USD, 14.4 billion JMD, earned is insufficient to outweigh that damage. Now, UNEP states the environmental damage caused by cruises is largely from dumping of toxic substances near fragile ecosystems such as the coral reefs and mangroves, which Jamaica has many of. The toxic substances include grey water, wastewater, sewage, etc., which have in many instances been routinely discharged in the Caribbean Sea and in our waters by cruise ships, resulting in the killing of those fragile mangrove and coral ecosystems with devastating ripple effects. No mangroves proposition, that means no protection of our communities from flooding, no buffer from heavy waves and winds that leads to the erosion of the coastline, and no natural protection of our unique coastal resources. Now let's talk dollars and cents and a little bit of common sense. In terms of the flood risk reduction given by mangroves.
Point of information.
Accepted.
Thank you. We recognize that you're speaking about the dredging of ports contributing to marine pollution in Jamaican waters, but what proof of this do you have?
Thank you very much. We have a lot of proof. In fact, from 2009 to 2010, we will be recounting what happened at the Falmouth Cruise Pier. My second speaker, in fact, will be highlighting that. But let's just say the proof is there, and there's a lot of proof. So going back to my argument, a 2019 study by the World Bank in partnership with NEPA concluded that in poor weather conditions, such as storms and other cyclones, which Jamaica faces quite often, as you know, the mangroves protect, and listen to this figure proposition, US 2.4 billion in built capital in structure. Let me repeat that again. The mangroves protect US 2.4 billion in capital and infrastructure, including tourism infrastructure, which is on average about US 186 million in infrastructure protected per hectare of mangroves in Jamaica. So when our $92 million economic gain from cruise ships destroys the mangroves, thereby causing billions in infrastructure damage from flooding, not accepted at this time, how will we afford that damage? Judges, 2.4 billion versus 92 million, the math is simply not computing. The environmental damage from cruises clearly outweighs the economic gain. These mangroves that I'm talking about protect unique tourist spots like the Luminous Lagoon in Trelawney. When we destroy the mangroves, will this and other unique attractions will be killed, and the bioluminescent organisms in that lagoon and several businesses who depend on it will die. Proposition, how much does a Luminous Lagoon cost? Is it more or less than the 92 million US that we're bringing in? Is it on Amazon, and does it ship to Jamaica? No. No coral reefs, much like the mangroves. There goes critical habitat for marine life, and there goes the fishing industry with the escovitch fish we all love, and our opportunity for marine tourist activities like snorkeling and scuba diving. Millions more lost at sea when Jamaica not pretty again, because we took the sea and its resources for granted and destroyed the environment. Now we must underscore that when pollution from cruises destroys these ecosystems, the remedy is not as simple as just taking some of the money that we have earned from cruises and just replanting corals and mangroves, for example. Leaving those mangroves and corals and the environment alone is better than restoring, as corals and mangroves take, on average, 25 to 40 years, respectively, to get back to full maturity. That means for a few decades, we will lose the significant economic and social benefit to our people from fishing, marine ecotourism, the tourism that you talked about, etc., while we wait to restore the habitat that we have destroyed. Also, both corals and mangroves need to be replaced, and this is very expensive. It requires a lot of technical input over all those decades I spoke about, and it is extremely intensive. So, what we need to do, let's not disturb this thing in the first place, right? Because it is clear that this is not a problem you just create and then throw money at it to try and sail off into the sunset. Your money cannot solve this, at least not effectively. This is a problem you avoid in the first place, like the plague, because the environmental degradation from cruise ships will always outweigh the economic gain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First speaker from Team Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. I now call upon the second speaker from the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation to continue the argumentation on behalf of side proposition. Hear, hear.
Thank you, my distinguished judges, worthy opponents, colleagues, viewers. And let me start with what the opponent said. Mangroves protect US $2.4 billion in infrastructure. Replacing mangroves is a technical exercise. However, in quoting all of this data about mangrove and its destruction and its time for regeneration, you have not put forward that it is cruise ships that damages the mangroves. My worthy opponents, climate change is real. Coral bleaching is real. Pollution from land-based sources is real. All of these contribute to destruction of mangroves. All of these contribute to the pollution of our marine environment. You have not pinpointed that cruise ships are the sole source for mangrove destruction. Thank you for conveying that point.
Point of information.
Not taken at this time. My worthy opponents, Jamaica is a small developing island where in the Caribbean, tourism is a key developer for us. Environmental conservation is also another key priority for us. So it would be amiss of us to think that the government would invest so much $1 billion, which my first speaker would have highlighted, at the cost of the environment. We are talking about sustainable development, we are talking about economic growth. Taken.
Your first speaker mentioned that the government was actually not investing this money, but that the money was invested by an external source. Is that not what your first speaker mentioned?
Thank you for your point of information. My first speaker highlighted that it was a partnership for the development. The funding for the development of cruise ship was a partnership. The expertise, etc., is from the people and the government of Jamaica. And we are well aware of that, being the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, where the responsibility for cruise ships, for the cargoes, etc., falls within the ministry. The blue economy of Jamaica, in as recent as a study produced February 2024 by Capri, states that tourism industry emerges as a pillar of Jamaica's blue economy, which contributes to GDP and employment. The study goes on to advise that a focus on artisanal fisheries, you spoke about the different types of fisheries, sustainable fisheries, ecotourism, blue finance, etc., is explored, and its diversification and equitable distribution of social and environmental benefits is one of the forefront for Jamaica's approach to the blue economy. Significant economic gains have been experienced with minimal environmental damage. You spoke about the Falmouth Pier in 2009 to 2010. The Falmouth Pier is one of the most used piers in Jamaica to this date. Most ships come to that area. Now, the PAJ has been doing mangrove restoration, not only in the Falmouth area, and speaking of the Falmouth area, which you highlighted, they have developed Falmouth Town. It is one of the most tourist-centric, attractive piers in Jamaica. We have the largest cruise ship that ever came to Falmouth. Development is happening in Falmouth. People didn't even know about it, but a lot is happening right now. Also, we must recognize that the study revealed that the adoption of the blue economy concept was very promising for Jamaica, particularly in respect to tourism and the fisheries and the blue financing, because it balanced growth, conservation, development, and it showed commitment with respect to policies and global cooperation, especially for the country of Jamaica. Reinvestment into environmental conservation has been paramount and forefront of the development of our cruise ship tourism. The economic gains from these cruise ship tourism has really been heavily invested into environmental conservation projects. There are a myriad of projects happening now. Even with the Port Royal, which was more recent development, we're seeing water, sewage, etc. being placed in Port Royal, something that was never there before. We're seeing mangrove replanting, mangrove restoration, a lot of research, etc. going on. So the environmental impact is not significant. In fact, it is aiding to environmental sustainable development. It is aiding to environmental restoration because of the tourists
Point of information.
from the cruise ship. Taken.
So what we are saying is that we acknowledge that the restoration work is being done. But how does the restoration work? Means that you have destroyed something. How does the economic gain from that outweigh the actual degradation in the first place?
Thank
That
you.
is not
Thank you.
demonstrated.
There is no demonstration that cruise ship has contributed to environmental degradation. None. As a matter of fact, the development of cruise ship is regulated by the National Environmental and Planning Agency of Jamaica. Environmental impact assessments are undertaken, and of course, all of that is taken into consideration when we speak about development. Reinvestment into environmental considerations is paramount for the government of Jamaica. We are dependent on our natural resources. The sand, the sea, the trees, the fishes, everything is all dependent. So there's no economic growth without environmental consideration, and the cruise ship industry as a whole has not, and I will say has not, contributed to the significant amount of environmental damage that you have procured, and definitely does not outweigh the economic gain. You have proposed no value with respect to the damages caused by cruise tourism. So in conclusion, the economic benefits for cruise ship tourism provides crucial support for local economies. It creates jobs, it offers opportunities for reinvestment, and these advantages far outweigh any sort of environmental cost caused by that type of industry. I thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Second speaker from Meg JC. I now call upon the second speaker from MLCA. Here, here.
Esteemed judges, members of the proposition team, audience members online and in person, good afternoon. I am Crystal Paris Campbell, and I'm the second speaker affirming that the economic gain brought about by cruise ships is outweighed by the environmental damage that they cause. Now to my first point. The environmental damage caused by establishing and maintaining ports for cruise ships outweighs the economic gain. This is particularly true of dredging operations at ports, which are notorious for destroying fish habitats, negatively impacting our $17.7 billion or US $113 million fishing industry. To explain, dredging is a clearing of material at the floor of cruise port areas so as to keep the waterway navigable for ships. However, this is not a one-off activity, as there needs to be maintenance dredging to ensure that the sediment buildup over time doesn't make the water too shallow for cruise ships. Environmental mitigation for dredging includes the relocation of corals, replanting of mangroves, and using silt screens to limit silt debris from destroying flora.
Point of information?
Yes?
All right, so my opponent, I realize that the opponents there, you keep mentioning the damage that is caused by cruise ships, but there's no quantifiable number to it. You're comparing apples to oranges. If it is that we say we make $34 billion from Falmouth, how much was the environmental?
Allow me to continue and answer your question. The problem is these mitigation measures are expensive, have inherent weaknesses, and a track record of being poorly executed, which kills the marine habitat for our fish and destroys our $17.7 billion fishing industry. I'm glad the second speaker mentioned the Falmouth Pier. Let's take that pier as an example. From 2009 to 2010, that same pier underwent major dredging works, and although 4 NEPA teams were paid to monitor the works, JET noted breaches of mitigation measures required, resulting in further damage to the marine environment. Sewage from dredging the vessels was dumped straight into the harbor in September 2009. 140,000 healthy coral were improperly relocated before dredging began. And then silt screens that were supposed to be installed were improperly done, which caused more damage to the environment. Do recall, as my first speaker noted, the inherent problem of disrupting healthy coral, so even this best mitigation option was improperly adhered to. The environmental damage was not confined to the sea surrounding the pier, however. In 2017, same Falmouth Trelawney experienced effluent overflow in the township due to the rising tide caused by the docking of cruise ships, those same large cruise ships that were brought into the pier, which overwhelmed the existing sewage lines in the township. Just picture it. As a wave bringing a cruise ship of tourists flowed in, a wave of raw sewage flowed out of the town, which resulted in the closure of businesses that were directly affected by the raw sewage, which hindered productivity, which was a major waste management issue.
Point of information.
Yes.
I am yet to hear the cost of all of this. I'm hearing it, but what is the cost so we can measure it against the economic gain?
Well, the cost was mentioned by my first speaker in terms of the amount of degradation that is caused to the environment. Environmental damage is brought about by cruise ship piers and ships themselves, limited the economic productivity of farmers via sewage overflow, and damage the local fish habitat, which jeopardized our $17.7 billion fishing industry, which supports our proposition or position that the environmental damage brought about by cruise ships outweighs any economic gain. Now to my next point. Environmental damage caused by the release of harmful gases from cruise ship emissions outweighs economic gains from cruises. Acid rain is a destructive threat to our more than $200 billion agricultural sector. Also, these harmful gases are inhaled by our port workers, craft vendors, and other cruise interests, causing debilitating long-term harm to the health sector and a strain on the health sector. Let's think of cruise ships like massive cigarettes poisoning our environment and people with emissions while taking puff after puff of cruise ship port calls, thinking we're making bank. While these cruise ships are docked, they require an average of 50 tons of fuel to meet the ship's electricity demands. The exhaust emitted to meet these demands contains hazardous sulfur dioxide and other harmful substances in excess of 12,000 cars per day. The sulfur dioxide emitted generates acid rain, which degrades our fertile soil and otherwise inhibits plant growth. This spells destruction for our now expanding agricultural sector. We literally cannot afford to slaughter the more than $200 billion agricultural sector for the tens of cruise ships bringing in a small fraction of that figure. The agricultural sector already has to fight against the yearly drought that seems to always take us by surprise and flooding from heavy non-acidic rain. So let's not add insult to injury with acidic rain. Sulfur dioxide also contributes to respiratory illnesses such as COPD, asthma, and lung cancer. All of these are lifelong non-communicable diseases which require expensive long-term care, often at the expense of our financial public health system, such as the National Health Fund that provides well over $5 billion in support of patients. And that's just surface-level financial costs to pay. When coupled with this economic value loss due to the reduced life expectancy of our human capital, a limited productive capacity of our cruise tourism and related sector, and the damage to our $200 billion agricultural sector, it is clear that environmental damage will then damage our health, far outweighs the economic gain from cruises. Proposition, this is the cost of your so-called economic gain. Can we afford it? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Second speaker from Team Opposition, Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. All right, we're at that time in our debate, very exciting time. We're going to have cross-questioning. So we are going to allot 5 minutes to the opposition team, and they'll ask questions of the proposition team. Each question is limited to 20 seconds. Each answer or response to the question limited to 45 seconds. Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, your 5 minutes begins now.
So much has been made about the economic gain, right? And questions have been asked about what is the destruction to the environment caused by the ships. We have stated that the pollution, and we've documented it through both of our speakers, is contributing heavily to the near-shore degradation. What is the money that we are earning that counteracts that dollar for dollar, as we have shown that it hasn't?
Time.
My opponent, you have not shown the cost of that contribution. You keep speculating. You say contribution. What percentage is that contribution? The damage to the environment is caused by both natural and man-made pollutants. You cannot just speculate. You need to give us a figure.
So, to our next question, the figure that we have quoted are several figures. It's the damage to agriculture from acid rain. It's the damage to the tourism sector and other resources. But what is the figure, what is the percentage of that $14 billion that we are bringing in that surpasses all of these contributions to the sectors of Jamaica?
My opponent, again, you are speculating. You keep restating figures that aren't accurate. You're misleading the audience and the honorable judges. You mentioned that $14 billion is direct expense from the tourists who come to Jamaica. They're spending. You have yet to calculate the port fees. You have yet to calculate the spin-off from businesses. You have yet to calculate the collection of the tourism tax. You have missed so many things in your calculation, my opponent.
Thank you very much. What we did was be very generous with our calculations. Factoring all of those things, we have used the money spent because we know that it's only around $300 million. It's directly through the TEF tax and other stuff that comes in from cruise ships specifically. And we're being generous to say that we are giving you even more money and showing that it does not counteract the damage to the environment. And our question.
Thank you. Response?
My opponent, I will quote some figures for you. So the PAJ annual reports state that $4 billion was made in the last 5 years from Montego Bay alone. $3.5 billion was made in Ocherios, $3 billion in Falmouth. And that is just from the collection of docking fees. Get your facts right.
But how much of that money was actually allocated to the protection of the environment?
My opponent will vary from the economic gain versus economic gain versus the impact of environmental damage from cruise ship. That is what we're debating.
Proposition, you've given us some information about the jobs that are being created by the cruise ship industry. What about the jobs that are being lost? In Falmouth, for example, when the effluent comes up and the small businesses have to close, what about the economic loss that we're also suffering because of the environmental degradation caused by cruise ships?
My opponent, again, you speculate. And you know, this seems to be the theme of your argument, speculation. The sewage that you're referring to, there is no report that directly links that to any sort of cruise tourism in Falmouth. And you cannot provide such a report because it does not exist. Do not speculate.
Thank you very much. What we're quoting, please don't mislead the audience. We are quoting Jamaican Environmental Trust figures, which is the only entity here that is doing what the government should have done to ensure environmental impact assessments are followed. Because the government itself, through the Port Authority, under MEG-JC, is being derelict in their functions in ensuring that the environment is protected and it is outweighed.
Well, we did not hear a question. However, kindly note that Falmouth continues to be the #1 cruise ship here within the Caribbean. Kindly note that Falmouth has developed more than it ever had before. Kindly note that mangrove replantation, job creation has improved and increased, surpassing the past 10 years. You can check PAG and the MEG-JC website for that information.
Thank you very much. But the question that still remains, does all of this outweigh the damage to the environment? You have not answered that sufficiently.
My opponent, I congratulate you. You are steadfast on your point, and that's very good. But the economic gain has been quantified. You are yet to quantify the environmental damage. What is the environmental damage, my opponent?
All right, thank you very much for that very robust exchange of questions and answers. I invite a round of applause. And we proceed now with the questions from the MEG-JC team. Those questions posed to the MLCA team. Your 5 minutes begins now.
My opponent, you are yet to quantify. So I will ask you this question. What measures are now existing that either one, what measures exist currently that...
All right, so you've just consumed 20 seconds, which was the time allotted to a question.
So just
So-
reminding you, just remember, 20 seconds
question,
to
quick.
pose the question, 45 seconds to respond. You must stick within the time frame, so we're going to allow the...
Well, are you able to respond?
We didn't hear anything to respond to.
Okay, well, you now have to ask another question. Or ask a question, yes.
How do you justify forwarding infrastructure improvements and amenities that accompany cruise ship
That is very simple. Thank you for that question. We simply, on a balance, look at what the damage is and will be to the environment and compare that to what cruise tourism is bringing in. As we've stated before, even based on the figures that you have just quoted for 5 years from the different ports, that's still more that we're giving you for 1 year of revenue. And what we are saying is that the damage now and the damage that will come significantly outweighs, as the MOOT describes, the benefit to be gained by cruise ships specifically. We can deal with the flights coming in and the on-land tourism. That is the real money maker. That's not even doing a significant amount of damage to the environment compared to the cruise ships. The cost that we're paying to the environment is not sufficient to justify.
Thank you, opponents. You had mentioned earlier about the cruise ship emissions from cruise ship into the atmosphere. Given that cruise ship has been mandated to go for green technology and there's no sulfur in or limited sulfur in the fuel, how do you justify air pollution from cruise ships and its impact?
Thank you very much for that question. And as a maritime lawyer, I love that question so much because we have signed on to MARPOL, as you know. We do not have domestic legislation to enforce those things you're talking about the fuel, about the emissions and all of that. And the cruise ships know it, which is why the Caribbean, and Jamaica included, has been such a hot spot for these emissions and all of these negative pollution activities. And that's why these cruises are allowed to get away, because we don't have any regulation specifically domiciled in Jamaica to enforce, and they know this.
The National Air Quality, NRCA Air Quality Regulations do exist, and they monitor air quality emissions. Do you have any data regarding the waste from these cruise ships really impacting without being monitored?
Yes, we do. The thing that you quoted a while ago is specific to air quality generally. Cruise ships and ships in general, as you know, is the domain of the Maritime Authority and to a smaller extent, the Port Authority. So what you are quoting does not factor in the near-shore disadvantages posed by the cruise ships specifically, but you're looking on a macro scale for all of Jamaica. Let's not mislead the people.
Following on your example, the impact of emissions were inland. You did not give anything around the area. You spoke about the tourist workers, you spoke about the markets, you spoke about the tourism, etc. So what is your proof there that the respiratory illnesses by these persons are associated with cruise ship industries and cruise ship tourism?
Thank you very much. As would have been stated by my second speaker, the contribution of the cruise ships just by one visit is about 12,000 cars worth of NOxes and SOxes. So that is a significant contribution to the emissions in Jamaica, and those emissions, as you know, don't stay on the near shore, they impact everything, and that's why we mentioned the issues regarding acid rain and the detriment to our $200 billion, far superseding your little $14.4 billion sector for cruise ships. That is how we quantify it, and that is the real risk posed to such an important sector.
My opponent, I've never seen acid rain in my life. I'm not sure what you're talking about. But let me ask you, without the revenue from cruise tourism, how would you fund environmental conservation?
Thank you for that. Well, funding it would be even less of an issue because it's not polluting as much as it is destroying, and the revenue that we are getting from much more lucrative endeavors can tackle the other issues that we are not contributing to, like the macro and micro pollution on a global level, like ocean acidification and sea level rise, which we cannot control locally. Thank you for that question.
All right, thank you very much. A round of applause, please. And with that, we enter into a period of pause. 1 minute. We will take a little break, allow you to refresh yourselves, collect your thoughts, jot down those final points ahead of the reply speeches, which, by the way, will begin with the reply speech from Team Opposition, followed by that from Team Proposition. Your 1 minute begins now. to relax and enjoy ourselves. We ran out of time. All right, so we call upon at this time the reply speaker from Team Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, who stand in opposition to the moot. Let's make them welcome. Hear, hear.
My esteemed opponents, judges, and viewers here in person and online, it is clear as we come to the end of this debate that side opposition has proven that the environmental degradation caused by the cruise ship industry significantly outweighs the economic gain. My first speaker asked you to consider the impact of cruise ships on its own industry and on the tourism sector as a whole. An unsustainable, cannibalistic industry is slowly turning all of Jamaica into Riverton dump, destroying our beautiful and ecologically diverse marine and coastal environments. The sand and the sea that we depend on is being irreparably destroyed by cruises, and the measly amount that we earn from these cruise ships cannot sufficiently repair this damage. Even the mitigation measures that we've spoken about to sustain the coral reefs and the mangroves drain the country of billions of dollars in comparison to these small sums being brought in, especially when this is compared to other aspects of the tourism industry that brings in more money and doesn't cost as much in the short or long term. The environmental degradation must outweigh the finite economic gain if no infinite amount of money can guarantee the sustainability of the cruise ship industry or fix the environmental damage that it's creating. The proposition's first speaker tried to convince you that we're creating jobs. There's so many jobs that come from the cruise ship industry. But as to the question we just posed, what about the jobs that are being lost? What about the destruction to the coastline, to the coral, to the reef? Is that something we can pay for? What about the livelihood of the fishermen, of the men that go out on the glass-bottom boats, these boats that will no longer operate when we do not have our beautiful coral reef to look at? When the effluent comes up in Falmouth and these small businesses have to close for multiple days because even the same tourists do not want to walk through the raw sewage to spend their money at these businesses, how will we continue to quantify that economic loss? Our second speaker showed you the impact of cruise ships on the nearshore environment and in turn on public health, the impact of pollution caused by cruise ships on the lives and livelihood of the people living in port towns, and the cost that these people have to personally bear to facilitate this industry. The environmental damage caused by the release of harmful gases from cruise ship emissions outweighs the economic gain that we get from cruises. In addition, the very act of preparing and maintaining these port facilities to accept cruise ships is destroying the natural environment, requiring the country to consistently deplete our natural resources and then also to tap into the resources that we are gaining from this industry to introduce these mitigation measures that require financial investment over decades just to keep this industry afloat. The proposition's second speaker posited that we can simply reinvest this revenue into the mitigation strategies. But our second speaker showed you that even when best practice mitigation measures are used, that these measures have proven to be insufficient. The proposition would have us believe that $92 million outweighs the cost of environmental degradation to the loss of our tourism sector, the cost of environmental degradation to the over $200 billion agricultural sector, the cost of environmental degradation to public health in terms of the additional assistance we'll have to provide for the additional non-communicable diseases being caused by these harmful emissions, the cost and the value of our coastlines, the value lost in maintaining the beauty and ecological diversity of our island, the cost of environmental degradation to the livelihoods of Jamaicans who are farmers, fishermen, small business owners, and also the value that we lose, that we cannot end up becoming the place to live, raise families, and do business. How can we achieve Vision 2030 if we're dodging acid rain, if our tourism and agricultural sectors are destroyed, if our people are so ill that we're losing money and productive hours, all because we want to welcome cruise ships for 8 hours at a time with minimal economic gain? The math just isn't mathing. How can economic gain outweigh environmental degradation that is so extensive and irreparably affects so many sectors that no amount of money can fix this problem? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for concluding the case on behalf of your team, Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. I now call upon the final speaker from the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, representing the proposition side. Let's make that speaker welcome. Hear, hear.
My opponents, we hear you, but you are yet to prove that the damage you refer to is as a result of cruise ships. There's damage caused by construction, human waste, global warming, amongst many other issues. As the reply speaker, I will summarize our key arguments and reinforce why the economic gains from cruise tourism, outweigh the environmental damage. Our focus must be on responsible tourism that ensures both economic and environmental sustainability. Building on the arguments presented by my colleagues, I want to remind you of the cultural benefits, potential for regulatory improvements, and examples of successful integration of cruise tourism into local economies. Cruise tourism promotes cultural exchange and enhances international relationships. Visitors from diverse backgrounds bring different perspectives and experiences, enriching the local culture. Additionally, local artisans and performers benefit from showcasing their talents to a global audience, promoting cultural heritage and boosting local pride. By implementing stricter regulations and environmental standards, the Jamaican government has been able to mitigate negative impacts of cruise tourism. For example, regulations that enforce the use of cleaner fuels, better waste management practices, and the restriction on cruise ship routes to protect sensitive areas. These measures ensure that the economic benefits of cruise tourism are realized without compromising environmental integrity. The recent initiatives by the Port Authority of Jamaica to improve environmental standards are a step in the right direction. We highlighted the significant economic benefits of cruise tourism, including job creation, infrastructure development, and sustainable growth. We discussed the potential for reinvestment into environmental conservation and the cultural benefits that cruise tourism brings. We emphasized the importance of regulatory improvements to mitigate the environmental impacts. You have not demonstrated any significant damages to our Jamaican environment due to cruise shipping, my opponents, while we, on the other hand, have provided evidence-based data on significant economic gain, and might I add, environmental gains as well. The natural resources valuation study conducted in the early 2000s, my opponents, conveyed that the cost of environmental damage is on average 10% of the cost of development. I thank you.
Thank you very much for that speech, for concluding the debate as a whole. And I now throw back to our dear moderator, Aniki.
Thank you very much, Jermaine, and thank you very much, teams, for putting forward your arguments. At this point, the judges will deliberate, and the next voice you hear will be that of the chair adjudicator, Jermaine Barrett, who will wrap up this match, announce the winner. But it has been a good match, and thank you for your efforts and the amount of research that has gone into this moot. So for those of you online, take 10, 15 minutes max and come back for the results of the match. Stay tuned.
So the question before us, the debate that just transpired, had to do with whether cruise ships are contributing disproportionate harm to the environment when compared to the economic gains that are to be had. The proposition team, the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, contends that the economic gains are worth the environmental harms. And they quantify that, and they articulate that that impacts the economy as a whole. It's not just in tourism, but also persons who benefit in terms of the cottage industries and the subsidiary aspects of the economy that gain benefit as well. They also point to the fact that a lot of the environmental harm, which they concede exists, and the motion compels them to concede that it exists, they say that that harm is mitigated by virtue of the funds earned being deployed to offset the ills that come about because of the industry. Now, Team Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs was fairly robust, fairly strong in articulating, enumerating, quantifying some substantial harms. They speak about acid rains. By the way, we heard that a member of this team doesn't know what acid rain is. So we heard about that. We heard about sort of the catastrophic impact on the fisheries industry, the farming industry. We heard some guttural reporting about sewage just being dispersed wantonly in Falmouth, I think it was. And so, importantly, when we look at how it is that the ideas were articulated on both sides, we noticed that the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, no, not Industry and Commerce, Economic Growth and Job Creation, kept asking, quantify. Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, quantify the harm, put a cost to that harm so we can kind of see what we are working with, right? But in our assessment as a panel of adjudicators, we felt that there are multiple ways of quantifying an issue without necessarily putting cost to it. And we appreciated Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs trying to put a dollar value to it, but there are some soft, subtle impacts that are hard to quantify in terms of dollar figures. And so what do you do in such circumstances? You speak about the severity of the harm, the severity of the impact. So for example, when you spoke about the health effects, that was not something that necessarily was quantifiable in dollars and cents, but it certainly gave an impact that this was a severe harm that needs to be mitigated. The final thing we thought about was whether, as the motion, as the moot compels us to contemplate, does the income from the sector, is it being used to offset the environmental harms? The Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs tells us that some of those harms are irreparable, and you can't rehabilitate some of those devastations that are taking place. And we saw that by virtue, for example, of the health effects and the loss of economic earnings for the farming community and the fisheries industry. Those impacts are not, we didn't see them as being corrected by the costs that are being gained from the cruise ship industry. And so what we got was, well, there are some legislative steps being made. We got some articulation of those, particularly from the reply speaker on Team Meg JC. But we got some strong contestation to that preemptively in the cross-questioning when the speaker, I think it was the first speaker on the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs team, told us that Jamaica lacks robust legislative infrastructure to treat with those particular harms. All right, so in the final assessment, we thought it was a good debate. We want to congratulate both teams, and we invite you to do the same. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a high-scoring match. The winner of this match has gotten, just by virtue of the matches I've judged today, the highest score for round 2 so far. 290 points. And that we contend was gained largely during the cross-questioning section. The way the questions were treated with, the sophistication of the responses, the thoroughness, the detailed explanation within the 45 seconds, we were very much impressed with that, coupled with the argumentation that went through, that were demonstrated throughout the debate. So 290 points, very, very, very good. And that compares to the losing teams, or the second place teams, 263 points. The winner of this match in the public sector debate competition for 2024, the team that will advance from this match to the quarterfinals round, is a team from the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. So congratulations to MLCA and well tried, Meg JC. The best debater. The best debater comes to us from the winning team as well. That speaker was the one who did the best job at hammering home some of the powerful, salient ideas coming from their team and ultimately responding nearly devastatingly to the opposition. That speaker, the reply speaker from the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This was quite a treat for us as judges, and we wish you all the best in your debate careers.